Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are starting something a little different. We're kicking off a series we're calling Crisis in Perception.
Yeah, which is, I admit, a somewhat heavy title.
It is a heavy title, but the concept itself is actually very simple and, frankly, a little disturbing when you really start looking at the world through this lens.
Absolutely.
The idea is that, we often think we are looking at a problem, say a bad boss, a failed company, or some kind of massive political disaster, and we think we see the exact cause. We point the finger.
Right, we look for the villain, the guy at the top.
Exactly. We blame the crazy leader. But a crisis in perception happens when we focus so intensely on that individual drama that we become completely blind to the system that made that drama inevitable in the first place.
We see the puppet, but we completely miss the strings.
Yes. And to explore this dynamic, we aren't going to look at some modern case study from the Harvard Business Review. We are looking at a simulation, a diagnostic model from 1851.
We are talking about Herman Melville's Moby-Dick.
Now, please, stick with us here. I know if you're listening to this, you might be having instant flashbacks to 10th grade English lit.
Yeah, struggling through those endless chapters about whale taxonomy.
Or the history of rope.
Yeah.
You all did it. But we need to issue a really crucial disclaimer right out of the gate. This is not a literary review.
No, definitely not.
We aren't going to sit here and talk about the symbolism of the color white or the biblical allegory or Melville's poetic meter. That's not what this deep dive is about.
Right. We are treating the ship, the Pequod, as a floating factory, as a mobile industrial enterprise. We're analyzing the 19th century global whaling industry as an early industrial extraction network.
We're looking at the org chart, the compensation packages,
Right.
the safety regulations, or, well, the complete lack of them.
Because the central question we were trying to answer today isn't, why did Ahab hate the whale?
Right. The question is, how does a rational for-profit industrial system get completely hijacked by a monomaniacal leader?
How do the shareholders, the managers, and the workers all get structurally cornered into working against their own survival?
It really is a corporate governance failure of the highest order.
It is. And if you look at Moby-Dick purely as a story about a man fighting a giant fish, you miss the point entirely. But if you look at it as a story about a multinational extraction corporation that goes entirely rogue suddenly, it looks a lot like the systems shaping our world right now.
So let's unpack this system. And every system starts with the people who built it, the architects. In this case, we have to look at the owners.
The capital. The money behind the mission.
Right. Because before we even meet Ahab, before the ship even leaves the dock in Nantucket, we're introduced to the guys who actually own the Pequod. Captain Peleg and Captain Bildad.
And these two are just fascinating figures from a system's perspective. They are retired whaling captains, which gives them this immediate aura of authority, right? Like, we've been there, we've done the hard work.
But they aren't sailors anymore.
Exactly. They're essentially venture capitalists. They're the principal owners and the commercial agents of the ship.
Melville describes them sitting on the deck in this wigwam, this little tent structure built right on the quarterdeck. They're running the whole show while the ship is in port, setting all the parameters.
And you have to notice the dynamic between them. Peleg is the blusterer. He's the loud, aggressive, bad cop type. He plays the role of the crusty old salt to intimidate the new hires.
But Bildad is the one who really got under my skin reading this again.
Oh, yeah. Why is that?
Well, he's the pious Quaker. Melville describes him just sitting there, literally reading the Bible. And he's specifically reading the verse that says, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth."
Right.
He's reading a text about how money is vanity and earthly wealth is corrupting.
While simultaneously doing what?
While simultaneously driving the hardest, most ruthless, penny-pinching bargain possible on the crew's wages. He's literally squeezing these poor sailors for pennies while reading scripture about how pennies don't matter.
It is the absolute height of hypocrisy. But it serves a very specific system function. He represents the tension between religious piety and expanding capitalist modernity.
It's that Protestant work ethic taken to a toxic extreme.
Exactly. God wants you to work hard and be frugal, but I am going to keep all the profit from your hard work.
So Peleg and Bildad represent the shore power.
Yes. They are the shareholders who demand the profit. They demand the oil, but they take absolutely none of the physical risk. They stay safe and dry in Nantucket. The crew goes to the Pacific.
And speaking of the crew and the profit, we have to talk about how these guys actually get paid. because I think this compensation structure is the precise mechanism that makes the whole subsequent tragedy possible. It is not a standard salary.
No, it's not. And this is critical to understanding the structural trap they're walking into. Whaling was essentially the original gig economy.
Explain that for us. How did the pay work?
Well, in the merchant marines of that era, or in the Navy, you got a fixed wage, a monthly salary. Yeah. You knew exactly what you were making regardless of the cargo, but whalers are paid in lays.
Lays.
Right. A lay is a fractional share of the net profits of the voyage. If the ship comes back full of oil, you get your tiny fraction of that wealth.
But if the ship comes back empty,
you get zero. Actually, it's worse than zero, because you probably owe money to the ship's store for the clothes and the tobacco you had to buy during a 3-year voyage.
Yeah.
You can come back in debt.
So our narrator, Ishmael, he goes to sign up, and he's thinking, okay, I'm an experienced sailor. I've done merchant marine work. He's hoping for something reasonable. I think he mentions wanting the 275th lay.
Yeah, he wants 1/275th of the total profit. And Peleg and Bildad just look at him and basically laugh him out of the wigwam. They grind him down. They offer him the long lay.
See, the long lay sounds better. It sounds like a long-term investment or something positive.
It is the exact opposite. In whaling terminology, a short lay is a big slice of the pie, like 1/10 or 1/12 for the captain. A long lay is a microscopic slice. They ultimately offer Ishmael the 777th lay.
1 barrel out of every 777.
It's practically a rounding error on their ledger. But I want you to think about the psychological architecture of this compensation structure.
It totally gamifies the economy of the ship.
It does. Every single sailor, from the captain all the way down to the cabin boy, feels like a micro-investor. Theoretically, this is supposed to align their interests with the owners. The harder you work, the more whales you catch, the more money everyone makes.
But the reality is that the physical risk is distributed entirely to the worker.
Exactly. The owners risk their capital, the ship itself. But the workers are risking their actual lives and years of their time. And here is the real trap of the system. Ishmael has no money. He notes right at the beginning that his purse is empty. Participation in this system is technically voluntary. There's no draft, no one pressed him into service, but economic necessity forces his hand. He must take the deal because he has to survive.
So you essentially have a workforce that is financially desperate, highly incentivized to take extreme physical risks, and legally bound to this floating factory for 3 or 4 years.
It is the perfect recipe for compliance. If you complain or if you refuse to lower the boats, you aren't just hurting the boss. You're actively hurting your own potential payout at the end of the voyage.
Let's shift and look at the physical factory itself, the Pequod.
The Pequod is practically a character in its own right. And it is not some shiny, state-of-the-art vessel. Melville describes it as weather-stained, claw-footed, and appareled like a barbaric Ethiopian emperor.
Claw-footed, that's such a specific predatory description.
It implies a hunter. The ship is this bizarre fusion of the primitive and the industrial. It literally has whale teeth set into the railings as pins. The tiller is carved from a whale's jawbone. The decks are worn down and wrinkled.
It really is a tool that has been fundamentally shaped by the specific job of extraction.
It's a cyborg. Part wood, part iron, part bone.
It feels a lot like an old, battered oil rig that's just been patched up 100 times to keep functioning.
That is exactly what it is. It's a mobile, physical plant designed for one singular purpose processing living biomass into commercial fuel.
Okay, so we have the owners on shore setting the terms. We have the pay structure that traps the workers in this speculative risk. And we have the physical factory. Now let's look at the org chart. The software running this hardware.
The maritime hierarchy.
We have a very clearly defined management tier here. The mates.
Yes. And Melville brilliantly uses the 3 mates, Starbuck, Stubb, and Flask, to represent 3 very different psychological approaches to industrial duty.
Let's start with Starbuck. He's the chief mate, and honestly, reading it now, he seems like the only sane person on the boat half the time.
Starbuck is the ultimate responsible middle manager. He's an Nantucket Quaker, just like the owners. Melville says he has flesh like twice big biscuit.
Meaning he's hardened, he's weathered.
He's tough, but above all, he's prudent. He represents moral responsibility within an extractive system.
He's the guy who basically says, I want to get the job done, I want to fill the ship with oil, but I also want to survive and get home to my wife and kid.
Precisely. He has courage, but it's a deeply calculated courage.
Yeah.
He actually says, I will have no man in my boat who is not afraid of a whale.
Because fear keeps you alive.
Right. He understands the risk matrix. He isn't out there for glory or revenge. He is there for a paycheck and basic survival.
Then you have the second mate, Stubb.
Stubb is the nihilist to the management team. He's happy-go-lucky, he is constantly smoking his pipe, and he just refuses to take the terror of the job seriously.
Do you think that's just a personality quirk? Or is there more to it?
Oh, it's definitely a coping mechanism. It is indifference as a survival strategy. If Stubb actually let himself feel the immense danger of what they do every day, he would psychologically crumble. So he treats it all as a grand joke. He copes with the horror of industrial extraction by laughing at it.
And then you have Flask, the third mate.
They call him King Post. Flask is pure, unadulterated aggression. He treats these massive leviathans like they are, quote, magnified mice.
He has absolutely no respect for the animal.
None. No sense of the majesty, no sense of the danger. He just wants to kill and destroy. He represents the short-sighted, purely destructive aspect of the industry.
So you have prudence, indifference, and aggression running the management tier. But who are they actually supervising? Let's talk about the specialists, the harpooneers.
This is where the demographics of Pequod become incredibly relevant. The skilled labor force consists of what Melville calls the isolados.
Isolados, meaning they are isolated from each other.
Melville defines it as not acknowledging the common continent of men, but each isolado living on a separate continent of his own. You have Queequeg, who is Polynesian, Tashtego, a Native American from Gayhead, and Dagu, a massive African man.
It's a highly diverse, multinational workforce.
It is. They are federated along one keel. It's essentially the United Nations of extraction. But notice the rigid stratification. The officers, the managers, they are all white Americans. The skilled labor, the guys who actually throw the iron and take the most immediate physical risk, are men of color.
And there is this really weird, tense ritual regarding their status on the ship, right? The dining table scene.
The Speckcinder chapter. This is crucial. Historically, in the early days of whaling, the harpooner, the fat cutter, was actually the captain of the boat. They held the most power. But as the industry modernized and industrialized, they were demoted to subalterns.
But they still hold a remnant of that historical status.
Yes, they still get to eat in the captain's cabin. That is their perk.
But they don't eat with the captain.
No, absolutely not.
No.
Captain and the mates eat first. And it's described as this suffocating absolute silence. It is incredibly tense. The mates are terrified of Ahab. Then, only after management leaves, the harpooneers are allowed to come in.
Melville calls it a temporary servants' hall.
Exactly. It's a performance of equality. The system said, look, we value you. We let you eat at the big table. But it actually reinforces the true hierarchy because they are eating the leftovers in silence in the space belonging to their masters.
It's like a modern corporate retreat where the CEO serves hot dogs to the staff for 1 hour a year. It feels like egalitarianism, but it changes absolutely nothing about the actual power dynamic.
Precisely. It masks the rigid stratification with a hollow ritual of inclusion. The democratic dignity they talk about is largely performative.
But there is a deeper, much more real bond among the crew, isn't there? I really want to talk about the monkey rope.
Chapter 72. Yes, this is the absolute core of the social contract on the Pequod.
So paint the picture for us. This isn't just a piece of rigging lying on the deck.
No. Imagine they have just killed a whale. They're processing the carcass. It's tied to the side of the ship, half submerged in the ocean. Queequeg is down on the slippery, bloody back of this dead whale, cutting the blubber with a razor-sharp spade.
And the water around him.
The water is boiling with sharks. They are swarming, tearing at the whale carcass right next to Queequeg's bare feet. He is in mortal danger every single second.
And where is Ishmael during this?
Ishmael is up on the deck, leaning over the rail, and they are physically tied together by the monkey rope. One end is tied fast to Queequeg's belt, and the other end is tied around Ishmael's waist.
Melville writes, "We two, for the time, were wedded."
He says, should poor Queequeg sink to rise no more, then both usage and honor demanded that instead of cutting the cord, it should drag me down in his wake.
That is just terrifying.
Melville calls it the Siamese ligature. And this right here is the true definition of the crew's democratic dignity. It has nothing to do with political equality. They don't get to vote on the ship's destination or their pay rate. Their equality is entirely based on shared exposure to danger.
In this extraction system, your survival depends entirely on the guy next to you doing his job perfectly.
It creates a structural bond that completely overrides individual self-interest. If I let you fall, I die too. This locks the workers together more tightly than any legal contract ever could.
It suppresses dissent.
Completely. because you cannot afford to be at odds with the man holding your rope.
It creates a coupled system. In engineering terms, a tightly coupled system is one where a failure in one part immediately propagates to the rest of the system. There is no slack. There is no buffer.
Yes. That is the exact answer to the question people always ask. Why didn't the crew just stop Ahab? They couldn't. The danger of the environment, the horrific extraction process itself, creates a forced solidarity. You might hate the captain, you might realize the mission is insane, but you are physically tethered to the man next to you. Dissent endangers the entire chain.
It weaponizes solidarity. Telling someone don't rock the boat isn't a metaphor on the Pequod.
It is a literal survival imperative.
So the system is incredibly tight. You have the capital on shore extracting the wealth, the managers driving the labor, and the workers tied together by extreme risk and structural debt. It is a machine built purely for profit.
And then the executive enters the picture.
Ahab. Now, in the actual novel, he is invisible for the first part of the voyage, right?
He is. He is a rumor long before he is a physical presence.
Yeah.
He stays locked in his cabin. And when he finally does appear on deck, he looks like he has been in a fire. He has this livid brand, a pale scar running down his face.
Right.
He has the ivory leg made from a whale's jaw. Melville says he is gnawed within and scorched without.
And here is the massive system loophole that Ahab exploits. The captain at sea is an absolute dictator.
That is the structural vulnerability. Once that ship leaves Nantucket, the institutional oversight, Peleg and Bildad, is entirely gone. The ocean's vastness obscures any external accountability. There was no HR department to email. There's no board of directors meeting on the quarterdeck. Distance from shore equals an exponential increase in concentrated authority.
But Ahab has a major problem. The ship was financed and hired to hunt whales for oil. That is the shareholder agreement. That's the business plan. Ahab wants to hunt one specific white whale for personal revenge.
It's a massive misappropriation of corporate assets.
It's straight up embezzlement. He is stealing the ship, the time, and the labor for a private vendetta.
So the question becomes, how does he get away with it? How does he hijack this deeply entrenched incentive structure?
Chapter 36, the quarterdeck.
Yes. This chapter is an absolute masterclass in charismatic manipulation and leadership capture. He calls the entire crew aft.
And he doesn't just start with a speech. He does something very specific. He starts with a prop.
The gold coin. He brings out a Spanish ounce of gold, the doubloon, and he takes a hammer and physically nails it to the main mast.
Whosoever of you raises me a white-headed whale, he shall have this gold ounce.
Think about what he's doing here from a systems level. He knows these men are trapped by economic necessity. He calls it the sordidness of their condition. He bypasses the complex, delayed gratification lay system, where you have to wait 3 years just to see if you made a profit, and he offers an immediate, tangible, shiny cash prize.
He short-circuits the entire compensation model.
He gamifies it even further. He uses their sheer greed to purchase their buy-in for his own madness. In one move, he successfully converts a commercial enterprise hunting whales for oil into a military and spiritual crusade.
And he hypes them up. He turns this corporate meeting into a religious rally.
He asks the harpooneers, "What do you do when you see a whale?" And they shout back, sing out for him. He gets them into this hypnotic call and response rhythm. He passes around the liquor.
But not everyone cheers. Starbuck pushes back.
Starbuck is the only one who clearly sees the system failure happening in real time. He says, "I came here to hunt whales, not my commander's vengeance. How many barrels will thy vengeance yield thee, even if thou gettest it, Captain Ahab?"
That is the shareholder speaking. That is the voice of capital saying, where is the ROI on vengeance?
Exactly. Starbuck is arguing for fiduciary responsibility. But Ahab rejects the commercial logic entirely. He shifts the argument from economics to the metaphysical. He starts talking about the pasteboard mask of reality.
He says all visible objects, man, are but as pasteboard masks.
He transforms the whale from a structural commodity into a symbol of universal evil. He projects his own internal grievance onto an external object. And Starbuck just folds.
Why does he fold, though? He's the prudent one. He knows this is wrong.
He folds because the hierarchical structure of the ship demands absolute obedience. And because Ahab possesses this terrifying magnetism, he overwhelms Starbuck's rational prudence with the sheer force of his monomania. Melville explicitly writes that the tools, meaning the men, are out of order if they try to think for themselves. Starbuck cannot override the CEO, even when he knows the CEO is violating the charter.
Now, I want to pivot to a specific chapter that I think is arguably the most underrated in the entire book when it comes to systems analysis. Chapter 46, Surmises.
Oh, this is the critical insight. This is the chapter that proves Ahab is not just a raving lunatic staring at the horizon. He is a highly shrewd manager.
Right, because if he was just screaming at the ocean 24/7, the crew would eventually mutiny.
Yes. In Surmises, we actually get inside Ahab's head. He analyzes his own workforce. He realizes he cannot strip the men of all hopes of cash. He knows that if he completely ignores regular, profitable whaling to chase Moby-Dick, the crew's basic economic need will cause the system to rebel.
So what is his management strategy?
He decides he absolutely must continue the natural, nominal purpose of the voyage. He has to let them kill other whales. He has to let them fill the barrels.
He uses the daily work of industrial extraction to keep them busy.
To keep them healthily suspended. It is camouflage. He uses the normalization of daily business operations to mask his private, destructive purpose. He gives them just enough business as usual so that they don't fully realize they are on a suicide mission until they are completely trapped.
That is deeply chilling. It's like a modern CEO keeping the quarterly earnings reports looking stable while secretly betting the entire infrastructure of the company on a high-risk vanity project that will ultimately destroy them.
Monomania requires the camouflage of normality to survive. If it looks too crazy too early, the system rejects it.
Let's talk about the extraction process itself, because when they do hunt these other whales to keep up appearances, it is brutal.
It is absolute industrial slaughter.
We have the first lowering in Chapter 48. This is the first time they actually launch the boats to go after a whale. And suddenly, out of nowhere, Ahab has his own boat crew.
This is yet another massive violation of the contract. Fedallah and the Tiger Yellowmen. Ahab smuggled them on board.
Wait, smuggled? Like stowaways?
Yes. They were hidden deep in the hold until this exact moment. These men are not on the official ship's manifest. They are not being paid by the owners in Nantucket. They are Ahab's private, loyal mercenaries.
That's huge. He is using company resources, the food, the space, the physical boat itself to transport his own private army.
And when they suddenly appear on deck, the crew is shocked. But again, they just accept it. Why? Because the danger is immediate. They are dropping into a small boat, the waves are crashing, a massive whale is thrashing in the water. You simply do not have the time or the bandwidth to file a union grievance when you're actively trying not to drown.
The first lowering is complete chaos. The boat gets swamped in the storm.
And notice Starbuck in this scene. The careful, prudent man. In the heat of the chase, surrounded by danger, he is suddenly willing to risk death for oil. The extractive system turns even the most rational, prudent man into an extreme risk-taker.
And when they finally catch a whale, the description of the processing, it's not heroic, it's gross.
It is a literal factory floor. Look at Chapter 70, the Sphinx. They behead the whale and hoist this massive dripping head against the side of the ship. And in Chapter 96, the Tryworks. They build a literal brick kiln right on the wooden deck to render the blubber.
The ship becomes a brick kiln on the water.
Melville vividly describes the black smoke, the roaring fire, the terrible smell. And there is a horrifying, deeply symbolic detail here. The ship is burning its own fuel. They use the whale fitters, the shriveled pieces of blubber that have already had the oil boiled out of them. They feed those scraps into the fire to boil more blubber.
It's a self-consuming cycle.
It is autophagic. The system feeds on the destroyed resource in order to destroy more of the resource. It's a perfect loop of industrial extraction.
Reducing the majesty of the Leviathan to just generic barrels of oil.
And this is exactly where the ship called the Bachelor comes in.
The other whaling ship they meet out there?
Yes. In Chapter 115, the Pequod meets the Bachelor. Now, the Bachelor is completely full. It is bursting with oil. The crew is partying on the deck. They are hoisting flags. They are heading home to Nantucket.
It's the ultimate success story of their industry.
It represents the system working exactly as designed. Profit, celebration, safety. And what does Ahab do when he sees this perfect model of success?
It turns away.
He completely rejects it.
Yeah.
The captain of the Bachelor asks him if he has seen the white whale, and Ahab basically ignores the reality of their commercial success to pursue his obsession. He actively turns the ship away from the home signal to continue sailing into the dark. This is the precise moment where the divergence between the business goal and Ahab's personal goal becomes absolute.
So why does the system persist? Why don't they stop him then and there?
Because of the deeply embedded feedback loops.
Okay, let's break that down. What's the first loop?
First, the normalization of terror. We see Little Flask dining on, quote, beef and thunder. The crew becomes entirely desensitized to the environment. The more they face death, the less shocking it becomes. The abnormal becomes standard operating procedure.
And the sunk cost fallacy.
This is a huge structural component. The lay system means you only get paid if you finish the voyage. If they turn back early or if they mutiny and force the ship to a port, they lose their lay. They've invested years of their lives and endured horrific conditions. They are locked in. Turning back means total financial ruin.
So they are trapped by their own investment in the extractive system.
Exactly. And then there is the crucial issue of external data versus internal perception.
The external warnings they keep getting.
They meet ship after ship on the ocean. The Jeroboam, the Samuel Enderby, the Rachel. Almost every single ship warns them about Moby-Dick. The Jeroboam literally has a plague on board and a mad prophet named Gabriel who explicitly warns Ahab that hunting the white whale is doom.
And Ahab just ignores them.
He completely ignores the qualitative data. He dismisses the human warnings. But, and this is so important for understanding modern systems, he loves quantitative data. He obsessively maps the whale's location. He uses navigational charts. He tracks the ocean currents and the feeding grounds.
He's using science.
He's using rational means applied to completely irrational ends. He's using data to hunt a ghost. And this is a very modern crisis in perception. We often think that because we're using spreadsheets or complex algorithms or advanced metrics, we are inherently being rational. But if the core goal of the system is madness, the efficiency of your tools just helps you arrive at the disaster faster.
Wow. The breaking point for all this really comes with Typhoon, right? The candles chapter.
Chapter 119. A massive storm hits them. St. Elmo's fire, the corpuscence, lights up the masts. The ship looks like 3 giant burning candles in the dark.
For sailors in the 19th century, this is basically a giant neon sign from God saying, turn back now.
Starbuck certainly sees it that way. The lightning rods are glowing. He screams at Ahab, the god of earth is against thee. He physically wants to turn the ship around. He begs for it.
And Ahab grabs the glowing lightning rods.
He actively defies the fire. He says, I own thy speechless, placeless power. He asserts his individual will over the elements of nature. And then he grabs his harpoon, which was forged in blood, and he threatens to spear the first man who touches the ropes to turn the ship.
The hierarchy holds, even when the environment is screaming at them to stop.
It holds because of fear, yes, but also because Ahab offers them a leader who is absolutely certain in the face of chaos. In a moment of existential terror, people naturally gravitate toward the person who displays no doubt, even if that person is clearly leading them straight off a cliff.
Which brings us to the final collapse, the chase.
Chapter 135. 3 grueling days of chasing Moby-Dick. The monomaniacal drive reaches its absolute peak.
At this point, the whale isn't a commodity anymore. They aren't trying to render oil.
No. To Ahab, the whale has become the monstrous embodiment of all his grievances. It is not an animal within an ecosystem. It is a metaphysical enemy.
And the system outcome, the ship, the floating factory is destroyed?
Smashed to pieces by the very resource it was designed to extract. That is the ultimate systemic irony here. The industrial machine is completely dismantled by the nature it sought to dominate and process.
There's that haunting final image. The bird and the hammer.
The skyhawk. As the ship is sinking into the vortex, the flag is still flying. Tashtego is up there nailing the flag to the mast, and a seabird gets caught between his hammer and the wood.
And he just nails the bird to the sinking ship.
Melville writes, and so the bird of heaven, with archangelic shrieks and his imperial beak thrust upwards, and his whole captive form folded in the flag of Ahab, went down with his ship.
The system drags everything innocent down with the guilty. The capital, the labor, the managers, and nature itself, it all gets sucked down in the vortex of a corrupted hierarchy.
And only one person survives. The orphan, left to tell the tale, and he only survives by floating on a coffin.
Queequake's coffin.
The symbol of death literally becomes the life raft. It is the only piece of the system that floats.
So let's bring this all back to our core premise, the crisis in perception. We started by saying we need to start looking at this merely as a story about a crazy captain.
Right, because if you perceive Moby-Dick purely as man versus beast, you think the tragedy is simply that Ahab was psychologically unstable.
But the real crisis lies in misperceiving an extractive industrial system as a stage for individual heroism or madness.
Exactly. Surface readings isolate Ahab's psychology. But a systems-level analysis reveals the institutional design that enabled his authority. The whale is misperceived as a metaphysical enemy rather than a structural commodity. The crew's democratic dignity is misperceived as true equality rather than shared risk within a rigid hierarchy. By isolating the individuals, the structural logic of the extraction completely disappears.
The tragedy is a breakdown of checks and balances. Ahab's quote-unquote heroism is actually a catastrophic failure of corporate governance.
The owners, Peleg and Bildad, created the vacuum. Their greed created a system where a man like Ahab was valuable precisely because he was ruthless and efficient. They empowered him. They ignored the warning signs because, historically, his dividends were good.
And the crew's economic dependency silenced their dissent. The lay system, the debt, the monkey rope, these structural elements made it physically and financially impossible for them to say no until the ship was already sinking.
It really does anticipate the modern multinational corporation.
Yeah.
It combines democratic rhetoric with racial stratification and charismatic authority.
It creates a reality tunnel. The Pequod became a closed world. It offered the men an identity we are whalers. It offered them a destiny we are hunting the white whale. And it offered them the illusion of profit.
When a system successfully fuses identity, destiny, and profit, it becomes incredibly hard to escape, even when you can plainly see the lightning rods glowing. Systems analysis restores visibility to those hidden structures.
The real crisis in perception is thinking we're free agents when we are actually tied to the monkey rope.
We focus all our attention on the charismatic, loud leader on the quarterdeck, and we completely forget to examine the contract we signed and the rope tied around our waist.
If you're listening to this and evaluating your own workplace, you might want to check who is holding the other end of your rope, and maybe consider if the system you are participating in is actively selecting for an Ahab.
Because if the system is built purely for extraction, the collapse isn't a glitch. It's the eventual outcome.
Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer link in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.